As your practice grows, it's so important to be able to stay organized and keep on top of things, especially when it comes to documentation, filing insurance claims, keeping appointments straight, and getting reminders to people. Well, there's a great solution for all of that, and that is TherapyNotes. TherapyNotes is the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. It's who I use in my practice. And so go check them out today, therapynotes.com. And if you use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months free. So check them out today, therapynotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 112 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you're here for the podcast. As I always say, if this is the first time for you to listen in, welcome. Glad you're here. Glad you found us. Glad you're listening to the podcast. If you're coming back for more, glad you're back. And I'm glad you're with me on this journey. It's been a fun journey. I'm just sitting here just kind of cracking myself up because I go through this routine pretty much every week when I record the podcast. And a lot of times I will start the intro like I did there, and I'm just thinking, this sounds so silly, but I don't know what else to say. I'm just glad you're here with me. But anyway, it's I have fun doing it, and I hope that translates to you on the listening end, that I'm having fun doing all of this. It's here it is, over halfway through January, and it's hard to believe that the year is getting off to a fast start, which is a great thing. I'm so excited for 2020 and just this new year getting started. I just got through to, as I'm recording this I'm actually recording this on a Friday, but I just got through doing my free webinar, how to be financially successful in 2020, where I just talk about in the webinar just some of the financial things you need to know around the financial side of private practice and just understanding that. It's been my theme for the last year. I put together a course and partnered with my friend Julie Harris over at Green Oak Accounting to put this course together to really teach counselors and therapists and those of us in private practice the whole financial side of private practice. It's something that we don't learn in graduate school. In fact, we don't really learn anything about business, except I think maybe there might be a few schools that are starting to teach that. But everything I've learned, unfortunately, I've learned the hard way, but I've learned a lot. And I just felt like it was important to share that with people. And when I met Julie Harris, I wanted to pull in a little more of an expert. She's an accountant at Green Oak Accounting, and they specialize in just working with therapists and counselors. And so she knows her stuff. So we put together this course, Money Matters in Private Practice, and the webinar that we did just really wanted to give people an introduction to some of the concepts in the that are covered in the course in more detail. But anyway, you can take a look at the webinar. If you'll go to the practiceoftherapy.com and just go to the top there should be a banner there, and you can still register for the webinar, and it'll be available for a short time, but you can register for it and see the replay if you haven't had a chance to do that. If you've already registered and you weren't in the webinar today, you should get a replay for that. I have to laugh because, it's really more fun to do a webinar with someone else because they can also catch the little snafus that happen when you do a live webinar. I was sharing my screen and didn't realize until afterwards that nobody saw the screen that I shared, and I was just talking and going through, and but we did get it in there towards the end. So, but anyway, it's just, it's fun stuff. And, one of the things about all of this is that I had a client earlier this week, and we were just talking about perfection, and so how we can be petrified by perfection, and we just can just get, really kind of get off kilter when we don't do things perfectly. And one of the things that I know about myself is I am much less than perfect, and I'm just learning to roll with those imperfections. But hopefully people get the gist of what I'm doing, and hopefully they see that I'm really at heart, I'm doing it from a genuine place of really wanting people to learn and be able to offer things that I think will be helpful to them. So anyway, that was a long way to say all of that. But anyway, the Money Matters in Private Practice course that I mentioned, and really the webinar was a way of really letting people know about just kind of a 50,000 feet or 30,000 feet overview of what's contained in the course. But of course, the course goes in more detail. But anyway, you can still get the course at practiceoftherapy.com/money matters, and you can learn about that. And it's a course through Teachable and through the Teachable platform. And you can check that out. So anyway, just wanted to mention all of that. So today's guest of the podcast, I've got two guests, and I just realized I haven't done this that often where I have two guests on the same podcast, are Aaron Potratz and Nathan Hawkins, who I met out in Colorado back in October at Killing It Camp. And they have got a really neat practice arrangement with each other. They're really partners, but they run separate separate practices, but they've partnered together to look at how they can work well together and actually make each other successful. And I like to refer to that as kind of a co-op model of doing private practice, where they're sharing expenses and they're sharing a space, but they're actually two different businesses. So it's a really unique model, and I'm looking forward to you hearing from them because they've got just a unique way of thinking about this, and so I'm excited for you to hear them. So without further ado, here is Aaron Potratz and Nathan Hawkins. The work you do as a therapist is important, and your private practice deserves the best website possible to allow you to see more clients. As the industry-leading company that makes marketing simple for therapists, Brighter Vision understands exactly what it takes to help your practice grow to new heights this year. Brighter Vision's team of developers will work with you to first understand your business and what makes it unique, then use this information to build you a website centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client. Best yet, there's never been a more affordable time to get the website your practice deserves. During the entire month of January, Brighter Vision is running its biggest sale of the year. Until the end of the month, pay no setup fees and get your entire first year for just $49 a month. That's a savings of over $200 your first year with Brighter Vision. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/Gordon. Again, that's brightervision.com/Gordon. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so happy to have today two guests, which is pretty cool. That doesn't happen very often that I get two guests on the same episode, but I've got Aaron Potratz and Nathan Hawkins from Oregon, and they have formed just a really cool practice. They're two people I met back in October at Killing It Camp up in Colorado. And so welcome, Aaron and Nathan.
Thanks for having us, Gordon. Good to be
Thanks.
here.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys. So as I start off with everyone, and you guys can just kind of hand off to each other in this. Again, this is a unique experience in recording with two people. Tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've kind of landed where you've landed with your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. We both started out as solo practitioners. Actually, I met Nathan in graduate school at one of my advanced marriage and family classes. He was kind of a mentor coming back and helping out with that course. And we just sort of kept in touch a little bit there as he had his solo practice and I graduated and started my own solo practice. And it was a few years later that I was looking for some office space, and he just happened to have some space available in the building below the first floor where he was. And it just worked out that we were going to join forces together and share some space, share some expenses. And that was kind of the beginning of growing together and realizing, wow, there are so many things that I know that can be really helpful to you, and so many things that you know that can be helpful to me. And so we basically ran parallel lives with our practices, me doing mine and him doing his, but sharing ideas and things we were learning, slowly starting to grow our businesses into group practices, adding some interns. And then eventually, that was like in 2014, I think we moved in together, we could say. Mm-hmm. And then in 2016, we decided to start another business together, another private group practice in the larger Portland metro area. And we co-own that one together. So we have our individual practices and then this third entity that we co-own. We don't see any clients out of that, but we run it together. We supervise people. And now I guess a year and a half ago, we expanded to another site. So we're covering a couple of areas in the area now.
Yeah. Wow. Anything you want to add to that, Nathan, in terms of your side of the story of all of this?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that drew Aaron and I together in the beginning is, so we were similar in that when I graduated to hang up my shingle, so to speak, start practicing, pretty much all of my colleagues used their name as their business. And I developed life encounter counseling right off the bat. And there was people that were like, why are you doing that? You know, and I said, well, at some point I'm going to have some kind of a counseling center. That was just my vision. And I wanted to build from the bottom that way rather than try to change it later. And then when I met with Aaron, that was in 2004. And when I met with Aaron at that mentorship type of thing, we kind of clicked, and he had mentioned that he wanted to start, he was very similar, and he was the only other person that I've met that was thinking the same way I was about that
kind of a small community here in the Portland area.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but there's also, I think that it is a little bit more. I mean, we're weird, basically, and so, but then one of those pieces where he's discovery counseling and I'm life encounter counseling. So when we joined forces in the same building, we were still separate like that, which. Later, as Aaron mentioned, in 2016, we joined did a joint business venture. We just kind of combined our names of Life Discovery Counseling Services.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really cool, and I think a lot of times, one of the things you mentioned, Nathan, that I think is important for people to remember is if they're just starting a practice, is to kind of have a little bit of visioning about where they want to go and whether they see themselves just doing just a solo practice or moving into a group practice. And I know one of the big themes for me here lately is just thinking about people that are in private practice and they kind of reach a ceiling, so to speak, with the number of clients they can take and the number of hours they can put into a week. And as a solo practitioner, that can be very limiting. But if you've got a group practice, it can really take off from there. And so I like the idea, particularly about just thinking about the name of your practice when you're first getting started of doing that. So, yeah.
Well, and go ahead. Sorry.
No,
I was just going to say,
you're fine.
I was just going to say one simple issue with that is websites. I mean, you could get a great name and there's not a website anywhere near the name that you have where you end up having to have the weirdest website ever. And so you can sit there at the computer for hours trying to figure out what you should call it, what you're going to be happy calling yourself, and then have a website that's going to be able to be there with you.
Right. Yeah. And that's I think that's one of the things that I think is important to not to get too far off on a tangent, but, when you're thinking of a name, you do need to think about the URL of your practice. I was, fortunately I was, I guess early on enough in the game where I was able to name my practice after the town I'm in, which is Kingsport Counseling. And so that really helped with that. So, but anyway, I digress on that whole topic. We could spend a whole hour talking about website stuff. But so as you guys began to kind of talk to each other and began to kind of form that partnership, what were some of the challenges you ran into?
Yeah, I think just as with any relationship, initially, really it was building trust and getting to know the strengths and weaknesses of one another. Initially, we got along, well, we still do. We got along really well. And that was, kind of like any relationship, sort of a honeymoon phase of excitement and kind of realizing, wow, we listen to some of the same music and you can complete my sentences and, this movie quotes and just all that kind of stuff was really fun and exciting. But that didn't have a whole lot of depth to it just yet. So as time went on, and as we started learning different business things and we were growing and we were gathering new information and trying to implement it, we really had to lean on each other, give each other information or, ask some really vulnerable questions about, hey, is this a good idea or does this make sense for my business to go in this direction? And we started really just leaning on each other in that sense, giving honest feedback about the direction we were going, how we were running things, and then also about each other personally. And that's, started out as a little bit of a joke between us, in terms of our personality. But it's come to be a huge element of trust between us where I know that there are certain things that just kind of overwhelm me or just I can't wrap my brain around it. And Nathan's fantastic at those things and they're easy for him. And then there are other things that I like to just get organized and create a spreadsheet for. And Nathan will poke fun at me for that. But that's just kind of how I function. And I'm good at those kinds of things. And so we've really learned, I think, over time that you really have to lean on each other and give each other that kind of trust.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. And then one thing I was curious about, it sounds like you guys kind of took your solo practices and then kind of slowly integrated them over time. And so what were the places that you found were just kind of natural integrations and how you kind of pulled that together?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When we first started out in that shared space, to get just really practical, you're looking at rent. So you're looking at square footage, like who has what offices, what's equitable as far as, in the beginning, Aaron was kind of joining over and he was, by joining over, just meaning coming in. I think he wanted his space. We knew that we kind of were, well, I knew I was interested for sure in possibly doing supervision and internship stuff with grad students. And I knew Aaron was also, but I think he was still testing me out. Like he was kind of going, well, that's cool. So how that worked just practically is I paid for the rent for basically 2/3 of the rent in order to have the other room, the additional room for that space. Over time, we moved into a totally different place because we needed more space. And that became a thing where we just split the thing in half. But again, you're looking at the same issue. You're looking at square footage. I mean, when you're working with somebody, it's really easy to make assumptions that you don't even know you're making. I mean, I'm going to join with you. Let's meet at this office. This is great. and then you both walk into the same room and go, "This will be mine." Like, you realize, like, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
One of the things that Aaron's really great about, well, first of all, Aaron's really trustworthy and a humble guy and really easy to talk to. But he's also really great about breaking concepts down. So I'll come in with this concept of what we want to do. And actually, I think he worked with his son actually to divide the space up. With, just I guess on some kind of computer program. But at any rate, dividing the rent up still one of those deals. And one of the things, not to get too far ahead, but I guess I'm just trying to be really practical for those out there that are considering this stuff. We have separate businesses. That's very clear. But the way that we treat our employees, and even down to the contracts that we write with them, and even down to the percentages of payment, all that stuff, we make sure is identical. Because these folks are in the same space. We had an issue just recently where somebody thought they'd heard something else. One of Aaron's people heard from, another person that we didn't know, like, oh, this is, and so Aaron's contacting me saying, what are you paying? What did you say that you, I'm like, this is what it is. I don't know. I have no contracts with anybody saying that, so it's stuff like, so it's kind of simple stuff like that. That's actually just the nuts and bolts that are really crucial. That honestly, when you're together dreaming, you're not thinking about any of that.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I had not realized, I guess maybe until now, until you said it, Nathan, was just the fact that you're running separate businesses. But you're running it. And what I would, in my way of thinking about things, I had a blog post that's been a real popular blog post that I did just on models of private practice. And one of the ones that I mentioned in there is like a co-op model. And it sounds like you guys are really kind of living into that kind of co-op model. And you're sharing expenses. But at the same time, there's a lot of transparency about what you're doing on each side and that sort of thing. And so that is so cool that you're able to do that.
It is very unique. And it was very interesting, I will say, at Killing It Camp back in October, meeting all these other therapist business owners. I think we were the only ones who have done something like that. I think you probably know more than I, Gordon, that there might be partnerships where it's maybe a single entity but multiple owners, but not really anything like this sort of co-op exists very often. It really does take, I think, a certain kind of relationship to make it work, though.
Right. And quite frankly, I've heard of the concept and knew the concept, but you guys are the first ones that I've run into that are doing it successfully, which is so cool. Yeah. So one of the things I bet people are curious about is how do you do all this without getting overly competitive with each other?
That is a great question. I'll give you the sort of funny answer first. We're very competitive with each other. In fact, we've got a shared waiting room, and sometimes when I come out to get my client first, some of Nathan's clients have a good sense of humor, and they'll say, hey, why is my counselor not out here to get me first? And I say, I don't know. I guess I'm just a better therapist or something. Things like that happen all the time behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But the serious answer really is that we know ourselves and we know our businesses and what we do, and we also know what we don't do. And I think just like any business and any therapist, any relationship, you know what you're good at and you stick to those things, and you refer out for the things that you maybe are not so good at or that somebody else specializes in. And along the way, I think we've really niched down on what we can do well, both in personality, the kind of clients that we fit best, and the kind of issues that we work best with. And so knowing that, actually, it's never really been an issue. I think it's really actually been a benefit, because if a client is coming to my practice looking for a service or the type of person that maybe I don't have, but they actually happen to be down the hall at one of Nathan's counselors in his practice, that's a benefit because I'm serving the client well.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Love that. And it's, I think the thing that, that it resonates for me is that just really, I think in our field to get competitive with other therapists is really a misnomer. I think it's a myth because there's more than enough clients out there for all of us, and that there's more than enough people that want help. And I think we do a disservice when we don't try to get them with the right therapist, a good fit for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really cool. So, yeah. So if somebody were maybe had a colleague that they were wanting to maybe partner with, or thinking about, I think in particular, like you guys, your story was just that you kind of met in grad school and you kind of lived out that dream together. If somebody else is out there just thinking about that, what would be maybe some tips you would give them about getting started and really the important things to think about in moving forward?
One thing, as you're asking that question, Gordon, that I'm realizing that is actually I think does play a big factor, is that we each had our own individual identities in business starting up. And part of the driving boat for that, for getting together, was the isolation that a lot of, I'm sure, the listeners have felt. I mean, you're basically just doing phone tag or voicemail tag, I like to say. So that, I think that identity piece is really important, because I already knew what I did. I'd been doing it for a long time. So I remember telling a client, like, oh no, I'm trying to maybe get a group together because I've been 7 years by myself here. So I think part of this journey is really spending some time understanding what it is that you like to do on your own. Maybe not be in a big hurry to get together. I know that it can save money, but if you're going to do that, maybe just think in terms of being together with somebody that you enjoy, but having things extremely separate, and giving yourself the permission to be able to not be there anymore, to go a different direction. I don't know what you'd say here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just in thinking about this, it really is like a marriage relationship. When you come to somebody else, you kind of have to be whole on your own. You got to be your own whole person, secure enough with yourself, knowing who you are and who you aren't, and then what you're looking for maybe in a partnership. In some ways, they're always going to surprise you. I'm always surprised with what Nathan can do, with what he knows. That really does complement me. And so just knowing my own limitations and knowing how a partner can really help with that, and being humble enough and honest enough and trusting enough and communicative enough with the other person to do that. I think all those things are considerations that if you're going to go into a partnership, you need to be able and willing to do those things. And in fact, at Killing It Camp, we did meet a guy I still keep in touch with. So Tim, if you're listening, I know he was considering a partnership with a colleague of his, and we were kind of running through the same questions. We've got a good relationship, but we just haven't communicated enough about what we're trying to do each individually and how we can both support each other. And then just really thinking through, all right, what are some of the practical downsides that we might face, and how do we want to handle those before we get into those situations?
Right. Yeah, I think what really resonates to me about that is just thinking about it. I like that analogy of kind of a marriage, and just I'm reminded of the Gottmans and kind of their sound relationship house. That graphic that I think a lot of people have seen, and the two things you've got to have are trust and commitment. And I would think that really would be true for what you guys are doing, and that you've got to be able to trust each other foremost, and then just a commitment to support each other through what you're trying to accomplish in your practices.
Yeah, I think an early question that you've got to start asking yourself about the other person that you're considering is, do I trust them based on what I know? And then being able to, well, like Aaron had mentioned, being communicative, being willing to ask a question of, if you don't, Um, I remember going into, this isn't going to lead to me not trusting Aaron, but early on, we were dealing with the rent was going, it was very new. We just signed the lease. And I thought that we could put these window coverings up. I wanted to do this. And, Aaron had put something up, and then the landlord came back and said, we want stuff uniform on the outside. We don't want curtains showing through. In talking with Aaron about that, I don't know if it was one of those things where we were trying to understand, like, where is this coming from? Is this coming from me? Is this coming from the landlord? Why are we doing this? Is there any way around this? So it was an early conversation. It was a little bit difficult. I mean, not super difficult, but one where Aaron didn't want to take the window coverings down, and they were nice. And so he was looking for a hole in that to be able to, and I didn't want to have that conversation because I felt like I was somehow a landlord, like I was doing 2/3 of the rent. So it went okay. Everybody was really respectful, but, and I guess I just think those little things, if it comes up, that's probably when in the early time you just want to start asking questions. And then you got to ask yourself, man, why, if you can't talk to him, why can't I say anything? Because down the road, when you actually decide to do something, I mean, when Aaron and I signed this last lease together, when it was with Life Discovery, I mean, you are filet-o-fish with your finances. I mean, everything is wide open with your personal, everything, your personal guarantee. You're looking at, you're trusting that everything's out there, stuff that you would never tell anyone.
Right. Yeah. That's that takes a huge amount of trust and vulnerability at the same time to do all of that. Yeah. So one thing that maybe a lot of people might be curious about are what sort of kind of written contracts and that sort of thing do you guys have with each other, or how have you worked through all of that part of it?
Go ahead, Aaron.
That's a great question. As you're saying that, I'm realizing we don't have a lot of written contracts because a lot of things that we have done have been verbal between us. And because of our relationship, we've really settled those things and put a lot of communication around them. And that's not to say that a written contract would not be helpful. I think in a lot of ways, people look at that as protections for themselves and certainly for one another. Really, I'd say the lease has been probably the biggest written one because that's divvying out the responsibilities of each person. But other than that, everything has really just been, hey, let's set up things this way. I'm okay paying for this, and I'm okay paying for that. What do you feel comfortable paying for? Does that seem fair and equitable? I guess if you wanted to write that down and put it into a contract, that would certainly be safer, but we just haven't been at the point where we've really needed to do that. And it's never really been an issue. I think in large part because of our characters. I trust his character to be fair, and he trusts me to be fair with something. I've got a conscience if something doesn't seem right. If I'm underpaying, I feel guilty about it. And I have gone to him and said, hey, this doesn't seem right. I feel like I'm, shortchanging you on this. And that has actually led to some really good conversations around, well, I'm doing these things over here and you're doing those over there. And we're just clarifying the value that we're adding that maybe we didn't realize, and that it might actually seem fair from there. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, that we don't really have a whole lot written down. But again, it's just going back to that communication and transparency piece that just has meant so much.
Right.
I think too, Gordon, that, I mean, you could, for example, I mentioned earlier about having these spoken agreements back and forth, about how we pay our employees. And you could set up a contract with this agreement about how that you're agreeing to pay the same amount that the other person is and all that. But to be honest, if I had to do that, I think I would have bigger fish to fry. Like, I wouldn't want to be in a relationship where I'm having to sign all these documents to make sure that everything's equitable. I mean, I feel like there would be that's kind of a sign for me that, like, this might not be a good idea if I'm trying to make this person agree with me.
That's true. We kind of lose some of the autonomy of our own businesses, or lose some of the freedom we have.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're trusting to a point, and then,
Right.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, this is just fascinating stuff, and I want to be respectful of your time and just thinking about all of this. What sort of parting thoughts would you both have, maybe for folks that are maybe thinking about forming a partnership?
I think for me, you need to honestly sit down and write out what your assumptions are on some really basic stuff, really basic things.
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff like if you were to rent space, you're going to have a window? Like, is that what you're going to do? Because if there's only one room with window, then how does that work? It's stuff like what you're assuming as far as buying materials. How are you dividing up the shared space with what you're going to purchase? Or you just know that you're going to bring chairs, and you're assuming that the other person, of course, is going to bring the same amount of chairs or whatever. Mm-hmm. Stuff like, just what are your basic assumptions? You got to go way back with what it is. Right. So I would say a person needs to honestly start there if they want to consider this. And then I think the next thing is, you might trust the person and respect them clinically, but you got to get to know the other part of their life, because you are going to run into it. You're going to be the person doing that.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess mine's a little more sentimental. I'm kind of a big picture, heart thinker, feeler here. And I would say my parting thought is, if you're interested in something like this and you do have somebody in mind that you have a good relationship with, consider making that jump. It has been phenomenal. They're going from that sort of isolation feeling of maybe being in a consultation group and talking with other therapists, maybe once a month or so, maybe even a little bit about business, but generally it tends to stay clinical. To be able to have somebody in your corner where he supports you and you support him, that kind of support and wisdom and guidance and really objectivity for myself and my business has just been incredible. I have grown as a person, grown as a business owner, and grown as a clinician because all those hats I'm wearing in the office around this partner. And whenever we interface, we're running into those with each other and having to help each other with each one of those hats. And that's just been a huge growth and encouragement that I think myself and my business has grown as a result of that partnership. So go for it. Take the risk.
Awesome. Love that. I love that. Well, Aaron and Nathan, it's been so great to have you guys on the podcast, and hopefully we could do it again and check in later on, get some more insights into this whole idea of forming a partnership in a practice. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you, and if they have other questions, and a little more about where you're located.
Absolutely. So as I said, I'm Aaron Potratz. I'm in the Portland metro area here in Oregon, and my website is discovercounseling.com. And you can contact me there. I'm also on social media. I've got an Instagram page and a Facebook page there, both at Discover Counseling. And then Nathan and I co-own Life Discovery Counseling Services. That's www.lifedcs.com.
Yeah, and again, Nathan Hawkins, and have lifeencounter.com. Life Encounter Counseling Services is my business. You can get a hold of me through that website. Also have an Instagram that's at Life Encounter Counseling. Feel it'd be great for you to follow. I try to be really normal. And of course the Facebook page that's linked over to that.
Great. Well, guys, I hope you have a good rest of your week and weekend. Thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us, Gordon. Good to talk.
Thank you, Gordon.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Aaron and Nathan. They were just a delight to have, and I'm so glad I've gotten to know them, and thankful that I got to meet them out at Killing It Camp. And learning about their practices. And I say practices because, typically on the podcast here, I feature just individual practices or what individual people are doing, but they've got such a unique partnership, and I just wanted to be sure and share that with you. And it's a great model to think about, just really kind of a co-op model of doing private practice. And as you heard from them, really finding the right partners and the right people to collaborate with is just so important in so many different ways. So thanks again for Aaron and Nathan for being on the podcast. So thank you for joining the podcast today. And I want you to be sure and check out today's sponsors of the podcast, TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll go over to TherapyNotes and just use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services free. And also I want to commend to you Brighter Vision, brightervisions.com/Gordon. And check out this big sale they've got going on in January. It's just a few more days left of that. And you can get some pretty big savings. You can save $200 by signing up with them now. And also learning, you'll also get your sign-up fee or your all those kinds of things waived, and it's like a $200 savings. So go check them out, brightervisions.com/Gordon. They are really the experts in being able to help you with your website and help you with your branding. So be sure to check them out. So thanks, folks, for joining me today. I know, and the other thing I want you to commend to you is just the Money Matters in Private Practice course that I've got available. It's a great time to get started in that here at the beginning of the year. And you can check that out at practiceoftherapy.com/money matters. And go check out that course. I think it can really be helpful for you in your practice. So thanks again, folks, for joining me for the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm so glad that you're letting me into your lives in this way, and into your ears and into your lives. And, I look forward to doing the podcast every week, and so glad you're with me on this journey. Be sure to take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it, and leave us a rating too. Leave us some feedback on whatever platform you might be listening to it on. So take care, folks. Have a good rest of your week or weekend. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.